The Intruder Within is a 1981 made-for-TV movie that's a 70-30 split between Alien and The Thing, with all of the isolationism and none of the charm. This was actually one of the first tapes I ended up getting my hands on when I restarted collecting movies on VHS a couple of years ago, and it's literally just sat on my shelf gathering dust ever since I got it off eBay. Why did I bother to pick it up in the first place? Well, it was a big box X rental, it looked relatively obscure, and I couldn't process what I was actually looking at on the cover. It was also quite cheap, so I took a punt. First and foremost, this film's a cheeky bastard. It's a certificate 18, only it's not, really. The film itself is a certificate 15, and nowadays it would probably be a 12, if not a PG. But there's one trailer at the front of this film that's for a martial arts movie, and if you've been watching my reviews for a while, you'll know that the BBFC had a burning hatred for anything ninja martial arts inspired around this time. So even though the trailer doesn't feature anything distinctly martial artsy, and little to no weaponry that I can recall, that trailer alone gave this tape a solid 18 rating. And I think I know why the distributors did this. It's a problem that even films these days get stuck with. Audience members automatically cast an assumption as to the quality of a film based on its certificate. If your horror or sci-fi horror has anything less than an 18 rating, audiences are turned off because they feel they know it isn't going to really be all that scary or interesting when compared to an 18 or R rating. Quite often film companies will attempt to bump up the rating by adding padding scenes that are more obscene or graphic. But this movie just took the shortcut route of sticking a trailer on the tape that the BBFC couldn't help but mark as an 18, thus allowing the distributors to slap an 18 on the box and, in doing so, create the illusion that audiences were going to see something really nasty or gruesome rather than what we ended up with. But what did we end up with? Well, The Intruder Within entirely takes place on an oil rig nicknamed Zortron. Its crew have been tasked with drilling in a previously unexplored area for oil, and so they're 19,000 feet deep and haven't found anything, which is apparently unusual. The crew is led by Jake, played by Chad Everett, a no-nonsense tough man with a heart of gold who puts his men above all else. And when an accident occurs on board the rig and a previously unknown geologist turns up at the rig to start giving out orders, Jake is far from impressed. After he and his crew do some snooping, it's revealed that Zortron isn't even supposed to really be in active service, and that it was booked in as down for repairs a while ago. The new geologist then admits that they've been asked by the board to take part in a top-secret scouting mission to find new locations for oil. Shortly after this, one of the crew goes to check on the status of the rig's drill heads and finds that one of them has been completely disintegrated. And it's here that we're introduced to Robin, one of only 2, soon to be 3, women on the rig, who's more than happy to flirt and seems to be quite a chirpy and upbeat sort generally. The other 2 women being one of the doctors on the rig and Jake's love interest throughout the film, Miss Bordeaux. Miss Bordeaux? Miss Bordeaux. They never really pronounce it properly in this. Who arrives along with some ship supplies. Things begin to settle when another strange occurrence occurs. This time, while digging, the shaker on board collects a series of strange quartz, which they take away for examination. Oh, and there's a Poundland xenomorph dragged up from the underground too, who immediately latches on to one of the workers and kills him through sheer fear. One of the other workers, Sam, also suffers an injury, cutting himself when he goes to grab one of the quartz. While the majority of the crew arrange a burial at sea for the deceased worker, which I'm not even going to get into the illegalities of that in modern times here, Sam begins to act strange. He says he's suffering from issues with his vision, and after a while he becomes fully deranged, attacking people who get in his way, before climbing up a massive crane and plunging himself overboard into the ocean. Shortly after this happens, the geologist leaves the quartz under a hot lamp for the night, only for it to be revealed that they aren't actually quartz, rather they're eggs containing embryos of even more Poundland xenomorphs. They hatch one and it develops into an infant stage, attacking a janitor, and then gets beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. The janitor, Harry, is then sent to the medbay, where he starts experiencing the same problems Sam did, before he too goes full deranged and off-screen rapes Robin. Classy move on the part of the filmmakers there, who ends up birthing a new menace. A hybrid terror that stalked the lands millions of years ago, wiping out any species who came into contact with it. And when it's revealed that the geologist on board knows more than he's letting on, all hell breaks loose, and it's down to James and what's left of his crew to take down the Intruder Within. I really was expecting more from this film when I sat down to it a few days ago. Honestly, I really was. I knew it was a knockoff, or at least a heavily homaged attempt at films like Alien and Predator, but this movie's almost painful in places. And its biggest problem is just that it's so boring, so dull, painfully boring. Don't get me wrong, there are at least one or two slightly action-driven scenes in the beginning and very end of the film. But there are so many absolutely pointless character-building conversations that happen in this that I honestly think I'd be safe in saying that at least 60% of the film is just people sat in canteens or on the deck of the rig talking about what they're having for lunch, what their home life was like, or just trying to hook up. But whereas with films like Jaws or Alien, where the inane chatter is endearing because the characters themselves are interesting and those moments are limited to natural developments within the film's pacing, where the cast are forced to wait for the next scene to happen, here the filmmakers use literally any excuse they can get characters together for to talk shit, just in order to hit that sweet 90-minute runtime. So who's responsible for this? Well, the writer of the film is Ed Waters. He's written a metric ton of TV, including TJ Hooker and many episodes of the series Kung Fu. This is one of the few film scripts he wrote, and you'd think with him being based in TV that a TV movie would suit him down to the ground. I, on the other hand, having seen this movie, would strongly disagree. I'm sure in television he was probably quite a decent writer, but this is the only work of his I've seen, and I have to say I was very far from impressed, honestly. The Cine is also quite patchy in places as well. For the most part, the emphasis appears to be on the TV element of TV movie, with a lot of scenes set up to use as little camera movement as possible, and it just looks like American TV drama and comedy from the time. I mean, I'll give it some credit, there are a few good shots occasionally thrown into the mix, and the establishing shot that opens the film is almost kind of beautiful. But it isn't enough to keep me interested. It's a very flat viewing experience that almost feels like it actively doesn't want me to keep watching. Again, the opening and closing scene aside, I must say that the bulk of this film is just bland. It's utterly bland. And only exacerbating the blandness, the set designs are just terrible. Everything is grey, dark blue or dark red. There's no colour, no variation. It's just a terrifically dull movie to look at. I mean, had there been even an iota of vibrance to the set designs, I'd have probably been a bit more on board at least. But in this case, we get nothing. Not a sausage. It's really disappointing. Directing duties here fell to Peter Carter, who unfortunately passed away in 1982 at the age of 48, a year after this film was released. He'd quite a few directing credits under his belt, but the majority of them, if not all of them, seemed to be fairly low-budget affairs. He did do quite a bit of TV, though, with his biggest contribution probably being 5 episodes of The Swiss Family Robinson. Here, given what they had to work with, I'd say this is probably the best it could have looked. It's not great, but he's arranged the cast more often than not in such a way that helps to tell the narrative visually rather than in writing, and the finale is somewhat redeeming in the eyes of the blandness that preceded it. He couldn't make a purse out of a sow's ear, but he's done the best he can. The other thing I need to mention here, which, to be honest, is probably the only other good thing about this movie, is its soundtrack. Now don't get me wrong, it's far from perfect, but it does do what a score should do for this kind of film. It creates an atmosphere. And if it can help bring a sense of value and richness to proceedings, then all the better for it. This soundtrack delivers that and comes across as robust and pretty decent. Is it perfect? By no means. But I'd be quite misleading if I didn't mention here that the music was decent enough and more than did the job. Finally, the acting, which is ropey. Very ropey. Chad's probably the best actor in this film, and his performance is best described as passive. The rest of the cast, with the exception of Linda Mason Green as Robin, who's equally quite a decent actor based on her performances here, are all awful. They range from dull, monotone deliveries to full-blown wackos. No one gets the tone of this film right, and as a result, it's all over the place, and not particularly pleasant. I also have to say that the big bad final alien in this film looks like a bloke in a motorbike helmet. Nothing more or less than that. In fact, if I'm being honest, it reminds me very much of Chatterer from the Hellraiser movies, only much more shit. The Puppet Poundland xenomorphs aren't that great either, but after sitting through 70 minutes of plot, being teased with a view of the big ultimate killer of species, and then being greeted by a Deliveroo driver with skin issues, they seem positively revolutionary. The fact that this film ends too with a potential lead into a sequel just made me audibly groan. In fact, when the credits rolled, I ended up literally saying out loud, "No, there bloody won't be." At least once, if not twice. The Intruder Within was released on VHS tape in 1982 in the UK by Transworld Entertainment. And that's it. It's never had a DVD or Blu-ray release, and I'm pretty sure no one is planning on doing one anytime soon. As it was originally broadcast in 1981, I'm not too sure whether there's a pre- and post-certification cover variant out there, but my version is a post-cert copy. The picture quality is more than decent enough, with no standout issues. It's just a fairly unremarkable and honestly not worth your time kind of movie. This was a ridiculously bland and uninteresting film in all honesty. Had it been 45 minutes with ad breaks, I'd have probably been more favourable of it. But because of the sheer pointless dialogue, total lack of action till the last 15 minutes, bad acting, unimaginative set designs and Cine, coupled with a final big threat that just left me laughing, there was a lot to be desired here. While it may be a bit of a curio in the sense that it's interesting to look back and see how films like Alien trickled down into the subconscious of lower budgeted filmmakers, this won't really be a title I'll be revisiting anytime soon.